Good morning, everyone. I think we are ready to get started here. We'll give everybody just one more minute to join in. Um, my name is Jared Arnett. I'm the Executive Director of Shaping Our Appalachian Region, or SOAR, which is based out of Eastern Kentucky, Appalachian, Kentucky. We're a nonprofit that really works to bring multiple partners together. And I've been working for the last 5 years on, rebuilding an economy after a downturn in the coal industry. Obviously, we're all in the same boat during this current pandemic that we're in. So we're doing our best to do our part as an organization, a team of about 12 people, to facilitate resources and communications and just help make our way through this. We work with the business community. We work in public health. We have a CDC person assigned to our office that works out of our office in Pikeville. If you missed Tuesday's session webinar, we had a session with her that talked about if you're an essential business, you're still open, you have employees and customers, best practices on how to practice social distancing, the things you should be doing in that space. So we've got that curated. It's on our website. You can go check that out. This is a part of a webinar series we're calling Business as Unusual. What we're finding is that our business owners, the ones that can push through, are pushing through. Many have had to close and lay off. And so there's lots of questions around a lot of change in policies from the state and federal government. And so we wanted to just create a space for a conversation here today with Josh Benton, who is he's a deputy director of the Kentucky's labor cabinet. So really overseeing this entire transition for the unemployment process in Kentucky. And we know he's had, I'm sure, little sleep the last couple of weeks. And he's doing a great job from our perspective with what he's been given. So we're gonna turn it over to him in just a minute to give kind of a brief overview of where the cabinet stands and the processes that are in place today. And we were talking just a few minutes ago. We understand that a majority of the audience on the call is going to be employers, and so we want to speak to that a little bit. We do have the functionality for you to submit questions. If you see the little Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, you can just hit that, and if you would submit questions there as we go along. Once Josh is finished with his overview, we'll do our best to work our way through those. If we have time at the end, we may open it up to verbal questions. You just use that raise your hand feature, and I'll myself or Josh Ball, who's our associate executive director of SOAR, we'll unmute you and allow you to ask a question and provide a comment. There's also the chat box. If you just want to share resources or ideas or concerns you have, you can do that there. So just a real quick recap. If you got a question, put it in the Q&A box. All of our panelists can see those, and we'll do our best to answer those at the end. Otherwise, I'm going to turn it over to Josh Benton. And again, Josh, thanks so much for taking time out. I know your day's crazy to share an update with us, and we appreciate you.
Sure, Jared. I appreciate the opportunity to be on. And as we've talked about a lot, this is, just a really good way to get information out. A lot of employers out there in particular have not dealt with unemployment in the past. And so just talking through what they can expect in this process and what their options are. Not to mention, obviously I know there's individuals on here that are going through unemployment as well. To address some of those questions that maybe come up, especially about expanded eligibility that has been going on. Just one point of clarification so that our friends at the Labor Cabinet don't get extra calls. We're the Education and Workforce Cabinet, so don't want them to get extra contacts on that. But
yeah,
they send them to us anyway. But we're just one point of clarification. So what I'll do is go over some of the changes that have taken place over the last couple of weeks. I'll talk through some ways that employers in particular can engage with us and what some of their responsibilities will be in this process, and what different options they have for keeping their folks employed, or if they do have to go through a layoff situation, what those different options look like. So it feels like a long time ago, but on March 16th, we started making some significant changes to unemployment insurance, just as more types of, more sectors of our economy had to either reduce their capacity or close altogether, that we wanted to make sure as many individuals as possible that were experiencing job loss could be eligible for unemployment insurance. And so on the 16th, we started making some of these changes. And the first was that we waived the 1-week waiting period to file. And I know that's caused some confusion about what that really means. And if you were confused on that, you're in good company. Unemployment insurance is an extremely complicated program, and just to explain what waiving the 1-week waiting period means. In typical situations, when the 1-week waiting period exists, is an individual can file for unemployment insurance after they've been laid off or experienced a job separation, and then that first week there's due diligence done on their claim. That 1-week period, they will not receive benefits for that 1-week period where the due diligence is being done. That's both a federal recommendation and a state law, that we have that 1-week waiting period. And it essentially means that, that you're not going to be, an individual is not going to receive a benefit for that during that 1-week waiting period. The payment is still every 2 weeks, but that in normal circumstances, the payment is for 1 week of benefits. The first payment is for 1 week of benefits, but by waiving the waiting period, the first payment can be for a 2 full week period. And so that's what waiving the waiting week did. It didn't change the fact that payments are still going to be on a 2-week cycle. It just means that for the first payment, it can be for a full 2 weeks. We waived a couple of other requirements for individuals. We're treating everything right now like a temporary layoff. And, we're hopeful that as soon as the economy can restart, outside of the essential industries, that the majority of folks that were laid off can go back to the place of employment that they were at a couple weeks ago. And so because of that, we are assuming that everyone right now is able and available to work. So, when someone's filling out their application, they're not going to have to make that certification that they're able and available. We're just assuming that they're able and available. And we've also waived the work requirements, the work search requirements, and in the application process. So typically someone would have to, if it's a permanent layoff, they have to actively search for new employment. Because we're treating this as a temporary situation, we've waived the work search requirement at the moment while we're in the state of emergency. A couple of additional flexibilities that have been provided. There's an expansion of the good cause provision, which would make individuals eligible for unemployment if they left their work for reasonable risk of exposure to infection. So essentially, if they had to go into self-quarantine because they feel like they've been exposed to COVID-19, then that individual could qualify. Or if they had to go and care for a family member affected by the virus. Now, some additional federal legislation, the Family First Act, is making this more of a requirement that employers provide leave, employers under 500 employees provide leave, and providing resources as a backstop there. But we wanted to make sure this was in effect before that took place. And so if there was that job loss associated with it, with self-quarantine or caring for a family member before that new law took place. We wanted to make sure we had that covered. And then the biggest thing is we expanded coverage to individuals who don't typically qualify. And so that means individuals that are self-employed, independent contractors, a lot of the nonprofits, the whether it be private schools, it's a kind of a catch-all provision that if you typically don't qualify, if your employer did not pay into the UI system, or you were an independent contractor in the gig economy, those types of things, and now you don't have work, that you would qualify now. So that was the biggest change, is opening up that category for individuals that don't typically qualify. Those are the biggest changes that have taken place over the past 2 weeks to eligibility. The things that are, I would say, have happened, particularly with the CARES Act that was passed last week. There's a couple of additional things that have taken place on eligibility. One is that UI duration has been extended for 13 weeks. So in Kentucky, that means that you can now be eligible for 39 weeks of unemployment insurance. So anyone who is on UI or had their benefits exhausted after January 27th are going to receive information from us via email this week about how to extend their benefits and take advantage of that additional 13 weeks. In addition, is the $600 a week add-on to the weekly claim. Now, this is straight from the federal government in the CARES Act that says anyone who's on UI will be able to have access to that benefit. We're still awaiting guidance on when we will receive that funding so that we can begin to distribute those payments. But essentially, there's nothing that anyone needs to do that's on UI to request that additional payment. When we get it and when we're going to start paying it out, we will let folks know when that's coming and when they can expect it and how they can expect it. Some things to know for employers right now as well. We know that there's a lot of questions about tax rates, about the UI trust fund, and what we want you to know, the actions that we've taken. We want to do two things here. We have two primary objectives. One is to keep the trust fund healthy, and two, keep the employer tax rates as stable as possible when we come out of this. And so we're doing one thing in particular for the employer tax rates is that we're not charging employer accounts. So typically, in a normal circumstance, if a company laid off employees, we would charge that employer their account that they've been paying into for UI taxes to make the payments on that UI claim. We're not doing that right now. We're freezing that activity, and we're just charging the trust fund pool. And we're doing this for a couple of reasons. One is for the tax rate purpose, but also because we have a lot of companies right now that don't typically pay into the system. In the laws, the federal laws that have been passed over the last couple of weeks, it provides states reimbursement for some of these extenuating circumstances. And so we know that a lot of the payments that are going to be going out that are non-traditional in nature, that there's that federal funding backstop there that's going to help us keep the trust fund solvent and healthy. That's a huge concern for us. That is the biggest impact on an employer's tax rate is what the funding amount is in our trust fund. So we want to take every measure we can to make sure that the trust fund is healthy. So we've had a lot of questions from employers about that, but we are, we're making every effort we can to make sure that those tax rates for employers stay the same and we keep our trust fund healthy. We're doing some other things that we've been given additional flexibilities in things like work share. So work share means that if an employer reduces the hours and wages of some of their employees, um, those employees can qualify for partial unemployment insurance. And that way that an employer can keep them employed, but that lost wage can be recovered through unemployment insurance. We're working with a lot of employers on those situations. The other piece being large scale layoffs. So we want to encourage all the employers who can that are going to be laying off folks to use our e-claim system. And so what that means is that if you are an employer of 50 or more employees, and you are going to be laying off at least 15 people, that employer can file the benefit on behalf of their employees. And that takes out several steps of the equation. So that, under normal circumstances, if there's a layoff, we're going to contact the employer and make sure that the details of that layoff and employment history are accurate. That gives an opportunity for an employer protest if it's not accurate. When it's an e-claim, the employer is already verifying the individuals that are going to be laid off. So if any employers out there are interested, or that's a scenario that they're looking at, again, 50 employees that are going to be laying off at least 15, encourage you to email uieclaims@ky.gov. So uieclaims@ky.gov. And someone on our team will connect with you so that we can set that up for you. After the claims are filed, the only thing that the employee needs to do is to request their payment on the benefit. They don't have to go through the filing process. So it's a much more efficient process, and just we encourage employers that are considering a larger scale layoff. Again, 50. If an employer has 50 employees, is going to lay off at least 15. We encourage them to do that. If they have questions about work share, so again, where there's a reduction in hours, but those individuals are still going to stay employed, we can work out a work share agreement where you can keep those folks on and they can still receive unemployment insurance. I'm going to give you another email address to connect to. It's workforce@ky.gov. That workforce@ky.gov if you have questions about work share. So it's those are two great resources. The work share piece is somewhat customizable because we'll work with that employer and the employee in a best case scenario, because every employer has different HR policies and that sort of thing. So we have to work through some of those issues to make things work. So those are just some changes that have been made, some additional flexibility on eligibility. There's a couple of outstanding issues that we're still trying to work through that we're getting questions on. And I just want to address those and just let everybody know where we are. So the CARES Act, which I mentioned earlier, it's pretty clear on the additional 13 weeks. When, if someone exhausted their benefits January 27th or afterwards, then those individuals can be extended for an additional 13 weeks. It also makes a provision for individuals with limited work history. So when we're factoring someone's eligibility and their weekly benefit amount, we look at the past 5 quarters of that individual's wages and earnings to determine their eligibility amount. The CARES Act says that states will have flexibility to provide individuals with unemployment insurance that have a limited work history and don't have wages that qualify over those previous 5 quarters. So we are awaiting guidance from the federal government they've told us they're going to give some parameters on what limited work history means. And we really see that as kind of the last piece of this. We know there's folks out there that maybe exhausted their benefits in November or December, early in January. They're still having trouble finding a job. But we're waiting some guidance, and when we have that guidance, we'll let you know how we're going to address it. In the same vein, we've been working really closely with chambers across the state, specifically the Kentucky Chamber. So, to get an idea of which of the essential employers out there are hiring. And there are jobs open across Kentucky that need to be filled. So with the Kentucky Chamber, we've partnered on the Who's Hiring initiative. And so if you go to the Kentucky Chamber's website, we've put it out on social media, the information where individuals can go out and see those open jobs. So if someone is having some issues with eligibility right now, especially those with limited work history, we broke that information, the job openings, down regionally. And so, I would encourage you to go out there to see the jobs that are open, and we're going to do our best to make sure everybody, whether it's through unemployment insurance, if they've experienced job loss, or if they're not eligible, even after all the flexibilities we've created, they're still not eligible. There are those job openings that are out there right now, and we want to encourage those. I want to address some of the issues that we've been facing in the midst of all of this. The UI numbers over the last 2 weeks have come out publicly, and in 2 weeks' time, we've seen about 200,000 claims that have come through. And after the week of the 16th, we knew there was going to be more. We knew those were going to be big numbers. And that's no doubt caused some issues. Initially, it caused some issues to our server. And we've worked really hard to increase server capacity. And that has, that our server and our online application has been working well. And we have a backup application in case the server does go down. So those backups have been put in place. The biggest issues that we've seen are twofold. One is, I said last night on the governor's press conference, is, our UI system is old, and it's been hard to change. And just going through all of those changes that I referenced, we've had to incrementally change the system so that the system can keep functioning. And so our priority in that was to make sure that we were able to capture information for anyone who was submitting information into our system, even if that meant, and I know that this happened for a lot of folks, that they received messages that said they weren't eligible. We're to the point where we fixed that. So if someone's not traditionally eligible, they're getting a message. I believe that started yesterday, that says essentially, you don't have enough wages to claim, but you may be eligible for pandemic unemployment assistance, and that we're continuing to process those claims. So that messaging has been fixed. We've also been able to process the claims that were submitted before that, kind of behind the scenes. And we started sending out notifications to about 40,000 people across Kentucky yesterday, letting them know that even though they saw a message that said that they were not eligible, or that they had zero wages that were eligible, that they qualify under pandemic unemployment assistance. So we're notifying those folks. We're also now connecting the new individuals who are eligible onto their online dashboard within our system, so that they can see the status of their claim. A lot of those fixes are going to be completed by the end of the week. We know that's caused confusion, and we are, we apologize for that confusion. But we want everyone to know that if they submitted an application, we were able to capture it, and we continued processing it, and they should be receiving those notifications going forward. The other issue has been the phones. That's well documented. It's really hard to get through on our phone lines right now. Traditionally, we receive about anywhere from 1,000 to 1,500 calls a day. We're able to manage that with a staff of about 12 on our call center. The week of the 16th, we knew that we were going to get more calls, and we started ramping up our staffing, moved folks from different areas within the organization onto the phone so that they could handle those basic questions. We've done that, and the calls have just continued to increase. We're partnering, with different vendors to help make sure we have enough people on the phones. We're asking people to prioritize their calls. One, there are some people that have to call, and we need those folks to be able to get through. So individuals who need to reset their PIN and password, we have to do that over the phone, and so we need those people to be able to connect to us through the phones. And then those folks that have accessibility issues, whether that's internet accessibility or there might be a disability involved with that individual where they can't file the claim online. We need those individuals to be able to make contact with our staff over the phone so that we can assist them. So those are the groups we are asking to prioritize in making calls. We have put all of the most up-to-date information on eligibility, on applying, on how to check the claim on our website, kcc.ky.gov, kcc.ky.gov, or you can just Google Kentucky Career Center. That's where you're going to get all the latest information on everything going on with unemployment insurance right now. Even on the other pages that are out there, we are either disabling those pages or we are putting a link at the top of those pages that encourages a redirection to our kcc.ky.gov website. That's where you can get the most up-to-date information. One thing that I know has tripped some folks up, I think it's going to be less confusing because folks are starting to get their checks and their payments this week, is that the first payment, that first 2-week payment is an auto payment. And so in the past, you would have to either go online or call to request that payment. So just to reduce traffic on the phone lines and to our systems, that first 2-week payment is an auto payment. And we started sending those on Sunday. We've paid out so far this week, now today, about $22 million worth of claims for over 40,000 people in Kentucky. So the UI system is processing claims, it's paying them out. We know that there are communication concerns. Most of those have to do with volume and the issues that forced us to be slow on our UI system to get the communication accurate. But we're by the end of this week, we feel like our system is going to be communicating the way it should, and I'm hopeful that the call volume will decrease a little bit. But we continue to add staff to the phone lines. This isn't our desire that people can't get in touch with anybody. We know that it's comforting for folks to just be able to talk to somebody about this and talk them through it, and we want to be able to provide that service. But we're just asking folks to prioritize calling. And if you're an individual that needs to get your PIN reset or your password reset, or an individual that just has accessibility issues, whatever that might be. Those are the folks that need to take priority in using our call center lines right now. So that's a lot of information to cover in about 30 minutes, but a couple of things just to reiterate is, we want people to apply. I know this is impacting a lot of people in the economy that do not typically experience job loss. And so we get a lot of questions about, what if I'm on commission? What if I'm on tips? Is the primary source? We look at your taxable wages. And so when we're looking at determining your benefit amount, it's not just hourly folks that qualify for UI. It's across the board. And so when we make those calculations, it's based upon someone's taxable wages and income. And so we want folks to apply, even if they're not accustomed to doing this, but they've experienced job loss. We want them to apply, and we're going to do everything we can to make sure they can be qualified and receive their payments in a timely fashion. So with that, I know there's been some questions that have come in, Jared.
Yeah, we've got some
happy to take some of
questions.
those.
You want me to maybe just read them to you? That way everybody knows what we're answering, and then you
Sure.
can kind of take a stab at it. I did ask in the chat box, and I'll ask again now. If you could look at those questions, we've got about 17 in there. We may not get to all of them, but if you're an attendee, you could go in there and just upvote, hit that little thumbs up on the ones that are most relevant to you. That'll help us kind of prioritize and make sure we get to the most pressing questions. This first one is from Tim Reed. It says, can an employee quit their job and receive unemployment benefits because they would receive more on unemployment due to the additional $600 per week benefit?
Sure, we're getting that question a lot right now. So the stipulation on UI still remains that the biggest determination of eligibility is that the individual lost their job by no fault of their own. And so even though the flexibility has been given on who some of the additional folks that qualify, and we are allowing some of the good cause provisions specifically as it relates to COVID. If someone leaves their job on their own, more than likely they're not going to qualify, and the employer still has the right to protest a UI claim. And so if it was not, if the employer feels like that, they've made accommodations, that the law, the CARES Act in particular, is really clear that if an employer has given an accommodation, specifically work from home, remote work, those types of things, then someone is not going to be eligible. But and even on the quarantine piece, it has to be a specific quarantine issue. We know there's going to be some things that get caught up in appeals. We know that there's going to be some folks that walk away from the job and say that their employer did not weren't following the social distancing, they weren't making accommodations, those types of things. Unfortunately, those issues are probably not going to be cut and dry. And they're going to have to go through the appeals process. But it's important to mention that the employer still has the right in this situation to protest a claim. If they don't feel like one of their employees left the job by no fault of their own, they can protest that. And it's not a situation where someone can just quit and get these benefits. It has to be a separation of no fault of their own or those specific good cause requirements.
That's very helpful. Here's another one about the $600. Can you explain who is eligible for the $600 additional UI from the CARES Act, and how would it be distributed? Sure. Again, same question with people saying they're quitting because they can make more in a week.
Yeah, so they have to be on unemployment insurance. So they have to be approved They have to qualify and be approved for unemployment insurance. I think there's been some confusion too about the $600 and then the one-time payment that everybody's going to receive essentially if they are under a certain wage bracket. The $600 is not distributed to everyone. It's only for those that have filed a UI claim and their UI claim has been approved. We're awaiting word from the federal government on when those funds are going to be accessible to states. So we know that the first eligible week for those $600 payments on top of a UI benefit are this week. So the week of the 29th. We are waiting to pay those out to until we know how we can access that funding stream. So the soonest that anyone is going to see that payment is potentially next week, but we don't have access to the funding stream right now. So there may be some backdated $600 checks. Our goal is when those processes get worked out is more than likely someone will receive their state UI benefit, and then the next day they'll receive the additional $600, and that's how that will flow on the payment structure. So that they would receive that payment every 2 weeks, just like they receive their UI benefit. Again, we're still waiting some guidance from the federal government about how that can be distributed, but and when. But that's our goal is to to make an individual receive the state payment one day and then the federal $600 the next.
Is that an extra $600 every 2 weeks or per week?
It's per week according to the law.
Okay.
But they would receive that in every 2 week payment, just like they get their UI payment.
Gotcha. Next question. If you're an essential business operating under CDC requirements, providing all protective measures to employees and work is available, and can they still decide they do not want to work? I think you answered that already.
Right. There's still employer rights in all of this when it comes to that separation. It still has to be of no fault of their own.
A service company, the work is slowed down. They're trying to keep the doors open. Some weeks have had a little work coming in. Should we apply for partial unemployment? We have W-2 employees, but we are self-employed. Also, how would that affect any loans, grants we might apply for?
So that's a good question. The CARES Act also provided more resources for payroll protection for small businesses. I think that's a decision that businesses that qualify for that extra assistance from the Small Business Administration are going to have to decide. It's my understanding that if they were to apply for the payroll protection through SBA, then they would not be able to pursue UI benefits. That payroll protection is going to cover payroll and wages and that sort of thing. So at the end of the day, we'll work with an employer that wants to do a work share, but it's my understanding that that's an either or situation.
Can an employer who's laid off their staff mandate employees who still have PTO or vacation time to take it while others get to file for unemployment if they don't have the time?
So that's a complicated question and a complicated answer. Some of that's going to depend upon their employee handbook, their HR policies, and some of that is going to depend upon wage and hour laws. And so we've had to bring in our partners at the Labor Cabinet in a couple of instances to help us with this, because there's not a blanket answer. We do think that the employees do have some rights here that if that that they do not have to take that PTO first. But again, it's going to depend upon wage and hour laws as well as that HR policy and procedure guidance that every employer has. So if we, again, in that circumstance, it's going to require a little bit extra work to get an answer. I would email our inbox at workforce@ky.gov, and we can get that started.
Great. If a company has no work available but may have a week or a few days in the future, will they have to start a claim over, or will they be able to continue the same claim and turn in hours worked?
Sure, that's a good question. So we can do rolling layoffs. And so there's a couple of companies right now that we're working with. We can do this a couple of different ways, where they're alternating weeks of what the layoffs are going to look like. So it can be one claim, and that is usually through an e-claim situation where we can work through that. But there are some flexibilities there so that you don't have to reopen a claim, every other week. And we can work with you on that. So that UIE claims at ky.gov is the best way to get that started.
We have no intention of closing our doors as a residential rehab at this time. We do have an employee, for lack of a better word, who's very germophobic. Could she stay home and receive unemployment even though there's a job and work to be done?
So I think that's going to be a question that, as the employer is going to have to make a determination on. I would say the first course of action they need to do is to see if there's a work from home option for that individual. That's what we would, I think, like to see first. And if that's hopefully the employer and that employee could come to some sort of agreement, whether it's a temporary layoff or a work from home situation. But again, if the decision comes to the best course of action is to lay that person off, we would hope that could be a temporary situation, and they could apply. But I would, we'd like to see that be the last course of action if possible.
What should people do that apply with a reduction of hours and then later get full layoff, either temp or laid off completely? How do they update their information?
Sure. So every time someone requests a claim, they have to submit if they've received benefits for our wages during that period. So if they start off on a work share and they are receiving, they're still working and receiving an income, and that should change, then yes, their benefit amount is going to change as well. So they would go out of that work share program, and we'd recalculate their eligibility amount.
To be eligible to submit the UE claims, they have to lay off 15 per 50 employees, or you just have to have more than 50 and lay off at least 15?
That's correct. That's just the minimum.
Okay. I have a veterinary practice in southeastern Kentucky. They have 6 employees. 2 of those 6 have asked to leave because of child care problems. We want to keep them employed. Is it better to apply the expanded paid leave to them? And if so, do the first 10 days still have to be unpaid? Or is it better to lay them off even if we don't want to? We want to be fair to all our employees.
Sure. No, that's, we know a lot of employers are, experiencing that. I think, again, that's probably a question we'd have to dig into a little more detail on, and they can email us on that, and we'll to that workforce@ky.gov, and whether those Family First Act stipulations come into play, if there's work from home options that can be done there. The payroll protection program that was just passed by the CARES Act. There's a couple of different scenarios that could come in play in that circumstance, and we can work with them to see what the best scenario would be.
What happens if someone uses it during COVID, uses UI during COVID, and then 1 or 2 years down the road, they become unemployed again? They wouldn't be eligible again, correct, due to 18 months requirement.
Yeah, so that's something we haven't even got to yet. It's a question that we know we're going to have to answer. But I don't think we have a clear understanding of that, what this is all going to look like, what this is going to look like after we come out of the COVID pandemic, and what our options are going to be. I think there's going to be a lot of flexibilities and things of that nature, but we don't know yet, unfortunately, what that's going to look like.
If someone applied and during the application was supposed to return to work on April 2nd and has since been told they are on furlough, do they need to update this information with the Department of UI?
So if someone has an open UI claim, our trigger to when to stop paying their benefit is when they stop requesting it. And so if their furlough or layoff has been extended, and they have still eligibility left, they just need to continue claiming their benefit.
Interstate claims are huge where I live, and no one can get through to make sure what state they should apply. If they live in Kentucky but worked in a different state during the base periods of multiple states, can they apply in Kentucky as long as they list the states they work?
So the basic answer to that is that you're supposed to apply in the state that you work in. So if you live in Kentucky and work in Tennessee, you should apply in Tennessee. If a Tennessee resident works in Kentucky, they should apply in Kentucky.
If someone cannot get through on the phones and need a password reset or need to change their last name, can they email UI assistance at ky.gov to get a call back versus waiting hours on the phone?
I am hopeful. I would say for now, keep trying on the phone line. So far today, the call volume has been lower. I think people are taking the advice that we've been providing. Keep trying on the phone line or the chat option, we'll get that straightened out as soon as possible. They can apply. They can send that to the UI assistance line as well, but of course that's backed up as well. We're getting through those emails as quickly as we can, but I'd keep trying on the phone line and the chat option.
The Angelina Reynolds, this was, I think, a follow-up to an earlier question about if someone quits, can they draw unemployment? We basically answered that and said it still technically should be displaced by the employer. And then this, as the employer, if they do quit and they do apply for unemployment, can they replace the employee? It seems like a
if they've quit, they've separated themselves from the employer.
Is there a website and individuals that want to apply for temp work for the UI helpline where they could go to apply? I heard our governor say they were adding folks every day.
So here, the approach that we've had to take on this is that we're working with a variety of vendors that provide call center assistance. And so, and there's a variety of reasons that we're going that route. We've essentially maxed out our own internal capacity to be able to move folks internally. And also we are low on the equipment needed to be able to work the phone line, both computers and headsets and all of those good things. And so we're working with vendors that that we already partner with at the state. And so I know there will be, that some of them will be posting job opportunities. When we get some of those things settled, we'll put out information for individuals who would be interested in applying.
Will taxes be held on the $600 or will there be a 1099 at the end of the year?
So individuals have that option. They can have taxes taken out of their payment, or they can do it at the end of the year.
Are self-employed people eligible for UI, and if so, how do they apply?
Yep. So go to kcc.ky.gov, and there's information on how to start your claim. What's going to happen is they're going to fill out their claim. At the end of it, they're going to get a message that they don't qualify under the typical program, but that we'll consider, or we will continue to process their application under pandemic unemployment assistance.
I'm going to pull one from Facebook that we got. It was about tipped workers, restaurant workers that may not have normally had enough hours and met the income requirements. They were getting denied yesterday. I think you may have addressed that, but maybe just hit it one more time.
Yeah.
Under the CARES Act.
We look at their taxable wages, and those individuals should be qualifying under pandemic unemployment assistance as well. So I'll verify that with our systems folks to make sure that that's not tripping folks up. But we'll make sure that, I'll say, one, we've captured the application, and if they got a message that said that they didn't qualify sometime this week, we're still processing it, and I'll make sure, because we're viewing this, if somebody doesn't have enough wages to qualify, they qualify under pandemic unemployment assistance.
All right. We've had employees saying their claim is under protest, but we as the employer haven't received any guidance here.
Well, so this has been a little bit of confusion. I know on the that there is a protest period, and every claimant will receive a message that there is I believe it's either a 10 or a 13-day protest period where the employer can protest a claim. There could just be a gap in time where the employer has not received that form, whether they can protest or not. That's going to be Form 412 is what it's known by, and so here's if an employer does need to protest, they need to complete that information on the form and return it to us. And if they don't, there's a place on there where say they do not protest. But right now, if they don't protest within that time period, we're just proceeding with the claim.
I'm going to jump down here. There was one. How are you addressing false claims for UI where the employer removes themselves because they know the UI benefits are better than their weekly pay, or they just want to sit at home, claim benefits? We talked about the other side of that question. Yeah. But then there's somebody else commenting on it that said they know the people that don't work that are claiming to be self-employed that are applying for UI.
Yeah, so there's still due diligence that's done on every claim to make sure, we know that's in these circumstances, we know that there are folks on every angle that are going to try to take advantage of the situation. I mean, whether it's somebody that is working the angle you just referenced, or we know that there are calls going out to folks right now claiming to be our office, asking for money. We know that there are emails, spam emails being circulated. So we know that those things are happening. I think for those that are submitting false applications, we still do due diligence to make sure that someone is eligible. We just kind of a general rule of thumb, even though these flexibilities have been made, we want to make sure someone has had a connection to the workforce. And so, even in all of the changes that have been made, if there's no connection to the workforce, then we're gonna, it's less likely to be approved. But then on the other side of it, if people feel like they're getting scammed, they need to report that to the Attorney General's office. If they get an email or a notification from us that is not from a ky.gov account, it's not from us, and we're never going to call and ask people to provide us money. That's just not something that's going to happen.
We got about 5 minutes here. I'll try to get through a couple more of these. Sure. Does the person receiving partial layoff, do they get the full $600 every week?
So that's another issue we're waiting on DOL to clarify. The law the CARES Act does not clarify it. So there's two things we're waiting on. One is the time limited employment, that if someone doesn't have that sufficient work history, how do we approach that? And also, if it's a work share situation, does the 600 still apply? In some conversations with the Department of Labor, they've told us they're going to give us guidance this week. We just haven't seen it yet.
How long will the $600 checks last?
The law says it will not extend past July 31st. It does seem to have some flexibility on all of these things, that they could end sooner if things open back up. Again, that guidance hasn't been provided, but we know that under the CARES Act, the $600 is only through July 31st.
Are there income replacement assistance options for an employee who's displaced to a lower paying position due to layoffs?
Yes,
Yep.
There is. If they take a job that's less than what they made previously, that's similar to work share, there can be some compensation on UI given for underemployed individuals.
I think this next one is probably yes. If someone's self-employed, pandemic has slowed work for that person, they're not allowed to be in the home with others. Should that person apply?
Yes, they should.
Yes. What about individuals who are self-employed in jobs such as DoorDash? Are they eligible for UI and the $600 additional benefits? If so, what do they need to do to get the claim?
Yeah. So if anyone's experienced, the job loss, yes, they should apply. We've had this question a couple of times. It's similar to the previous one. If they take another job, that's for less money, they should go ahead and apply. They're considered underemployed, and they're going to have to report their weekly earnings when they file a claim. So that may impact their amount, but anyone who's has had separation from employment right now should apply.
All right. I think we're out of time. Thanks so much. I think we still have about 6 open questions, and there was a bunch coming through on Facebook.
If you want, Jared, you're welcome to email those to me, and we can respond to them and get them back to you.
That'd be great.
I'd be happy to do that.
What we'll do, we've recorded this session, so we'll build a page on our website that will have this on it. We'll make sure to list those email addresses you've mentioned, links to all the state websites and resources, and then we'll try to get the list of questions we got that we didn't get answers to. We'll get those to you today, and if you and your team could put some pen to paper on those, and we'll also include those on the landing page. I think this has been incredibly helpful. Thanks for being willing to say, hey, I'm here. We're going to answer the questions, and from the Workforce and Education Cabinet, not the Labor Cabinet. So we really appreciate the work that you're doing. Or if you're in the Appalachian region of Kentucky, if you're in Eastern Kentucky, you can go to our website. There's thefuture.org/business as unusual. There you can find these resources from previous webinars. We got about 2 a week coming up for the next couple weeks. You can also find contact. We have business innovation champions placed across the region from Corbin to Ashland, the Red River Gorge area, Hazard. If you've got a business, a nonprofit in those areas that just say, I need to sort through all that's happening, we've got relationships with all these different departments, whether it's the SBA disaster loan or the PPP loan or unemployment. We won't have all the answers, but they will be a champion and do their best to find the answer for you and get you connected to the right people. So thanks again, Josh. We appreciate you. And we'll keep up the great work. This is obviously there's economic impact to this because we're learning at this point lives are more important than money. It's difficult decisions to make. I think we're making the right decisions. So let's get through this difficult time. We know we'll come back stronger than we were before economically at some point, but hopefully we can spare hundreds, maybe thousands of lives of making these critical decisions. So thank you. If you all have further questions, feel free to submit those on our Facebook page, and we'll try to get those all documented and sent off today. Any last words?
I just thank you all, and we just want folks to know that we know this is a hard time for everybody, and we are, pressing forward and not resting until we, resolve the issues that we're experiencing, to try to make sure these claims are moving forward, and that with all the new eligibility, that everybody who's now eligible is, our goal is to make sure they get qualified and paid out in a timely fashion. So we're working every day to make sure that happens, and we'll keep doing that until everybody's squared away.
Sounds good. I'll throw this screen up. This is our webpage. There's afuture.org, business as unusual. Again, you can see the upcoming events that we have lined up. And here's the button to click to contact your champion, and you can find our list of employees that are doing this every day and their counties they serve. So again, let's all just stick together in this, do what we can to flatten the curve. I've got a lot of business owners and entrepreneurs on here. We appreciate you. We'll get through this. Just stay on mission, and we'll get through this kind of intermediate, short-term, day-to-day figuring out life, and then we'll come back at some point and have some normalcy again and start growing business. So thanks, Josh, for all you're doing, and feel free to reach out to any of us if you have further questions. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Jerry.